Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 175 of the I Rock Knits podcast. I'm so glad you're here today, and we are chatting with friends. This is a brand new friend to me, and I would like to welcome Erika Field, who lives in the greater Boston area and goes by Grapefruit and Gardenias design. So we're going to start talking about that briefly. But Erika reached out to me about the farm yarn shawl knit along that we're doing and offered to give a prize to the farm yarn shawl cowl. And she basically designs a lot of her patterns in farm yarns and wants to do things with sustainably sourced yarns and knowing where her local fiber is coming from and those kinds of things. So I said, hey, let's chat about farm yarns. And she was willing to do this for me, even though we had never met. So welcome, Erika.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Erika also has a podcast. Do we look that up under your first and last name? That's how I have people look up mine.
You can look under Knit Kind.
Okay.
I went with a really simple Knit Kind.
Okay. Yeah. And I know that it's labeled that, but I sometimes like people can find me under I Rock Knits, but sometimes they can also find me under my first and last name. So yeah. And you've been doing that since 2023-ish?
A little bit more than 2 years, I think. Yes. Yeah. So that would be yes.
Yeah, something like that. So talk to us about why you have the title Grapefruit and Gardenias.
Sure, I can. Well, I've done a lot of artistic things throughout my life. So I used to make jewelry, and I didn't know if knitting was going to be the thing for the next 20 years or the next 5 years. And so I didn't want something specifically tied to knitting. I want something kind of tied to me. And I was thinking of all these different things, and my brain went back to when I was in high school and I had a custom scent design. Do you remember? They're coming back again. But way back, it was really trendy to have your scent made, right? And my scent that I fell in love with and, kept getting was Grapefruit Gardenia. And I thought, well, it's a beautiful flower. It's also like a little bit romantic and a little bit kind of citrus zesty. And I kind of have both sides to my personality. And so that's what I went with.
I love that. That's a great story. That's good to know. And have you always lived in the Boston area?
I grew up about an hour south of Boston. I went down to North Carolina for college, and then I came back up afterwards. So yes, pretty much.
And you have a young son?
I do. He's only 9 years old, although he's already 9 years old. It's sort of both, right? It goes by fast and slow, and a little bit of an older mom. So that has its own component to it.
We scheduled this around her, her son being at school, right? He's still in school.
Yes, until today, tomorrow.
Our school got out. Well, they're getting out too. But so you've been designing since about 2021. And you have 24 designs out there. I went and counted this morning and looked them up. And you've done everything from cowls to hats to shawls. You have a new sweater out that you published this year. A vest, and you do a lot in color work.
Yes, I love color work.
So
kind of like you, like I started with everything was about color at first. And then I've gone in different directions, but that color piece is still there.
So how did you learn to knit?
So I have this memory, and it's one of those things that somebody could tell me later in life. I don't know where you made that up, but I have this vivid memory of my grandmother, who was a prolific knitter. I almost can't picture her without knitting needles in her hands, teaching me one day when I was home from school how to knit stockinette. And I kind of can visualize this panel of stockinette that was like pastel pink, yellow, and blue. And then that's it. I have no more memory of myself knitting or even trying to knit again, which is really unusual because I crafted my whole life. And so I asked my mom, because I had aunts who knit. My mom does not knit. And I asked her, like, did I really learn? Like, I have this memory. Is it made up? Is it what? And did all these other things, and then came back when I was 40 years old. So my Ravelry name is Knitty Elf 40, because when I was 40, my son was not quite 2. And I really needed something else to do. And I wanted to make him all those intarsia sweaters and the Christmas stockings and all the things that had so much meaning and nostalgia and emotion in them that my grandmother had done for us. And she was long gone. She passed away when I was a sophomore in high school. And so I wanted to learn to knit. But, I didn't know about local yarn stores. I knew about big box stores.
Right.
And someone on Facebook at the time on the Buy Nothing page said, I don't have a thing to offer, but I'd love to teach someone to knit. And so I said, great. And I showed up at my library and I learned the knit stitch, and that was it. I was off and running and went from there. So I think there's a nice lesson to that as well about, it's never, first of all, 40 doesn't feel old now because it was a while ago, but you hear people learning to knit when they're 80. And it's just a good message that you can always learn. You don't have to have been someone who learned when you were 5 or 6 and has done it ever since. And then also just about the generosity of giving, and that, you can teach someone something as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about how you got started in design. Like, what made you think, now I know how to knit, what am I going to design?
Right. Well, it was a few different things. As I mentioned, I've always been crafty and I've always made things. So I did have a jewelry business, side business to my full career for, I think, about 15 years. And then again, when my son was young, little beads everywhere weren't exactly friendly, but yarn, he wasn't going to swallow a whole ball of yarn. So that was great. Yeah. So I had this creativity that I always needed to do. I always wanted to do. But you don't just jump into, you're brand new at something and then all of a sudden you're kind of imposter syndrome. Like, could I design something? But when you say some people dive in head first and some people don't, I went all in fast and I did find a local yarn stores, and I did find this whole new, or not new, right? But new to me landscape of what fiber arts were that I wasn't aware of. And so I started looking for patterns, and I was looking for things and finding some of what I wanted, but there were certain things I wanted to make that I wasn't finding. And I ended up in this very fortunate situation that through my local yarn store, I met some, still my closest fiber friends, one of whom now tech edits my patterns for me. And she was like, rah, rah, girl, you can do this, and I think it was one of your early podcasts I was watching where you said like about women lifting up other women, which does not happen a whole lot. It happens more than we think, but I think we're more aware of women trying to take down other women than lift up other women. And so having someone who I saw as an expert and who fully knew, where my level of capability was and said, well, you can do this and I'll help you, was huge. So a lot of what I still design are different cowls that have different fits that go over the back of your neck or go over your shoulders. And because that's what I wanted to knit for myself. And I was finding some, but I wasn't finding ones with like mosaic color work and stranded color work and all these fun things that I wanted to do all of the time. So that's part of why I started doing it. And then she really made it so that I could learn the technical side and what I needed to do. And she's the one who pushed me to learn to grade my garments myself and other things. So it was a little bit like, can you do it? And then why do you want to do it? And then once you find out you can and you do, it's why do you want to keep going? And that's where I've fallen down the farm yarn path.
Yeah. Because you have several shoulder season type cowls. Are we calling them cowls, I guess?
It's like, what do they get labeled in Ravelry, right? So yes, most of the time, and sometimes I know if I've even changed like what it's called, sometimes the Ravelry editors will put it back to a cowl. So I pretty much call them cowls now, yes.
Okay.
And so this is shoulder season. And it's really, this one's more of a dickie.
Yep.
So you remember a couple of years ago, the dickies were all the rage again. And so I designed one of these, and this is mosaic color work, or, again, this is where I think more technically we'd call it slip stitch color work as opposed to true mosaic. But I started doing some of those. And then it's
actually a cowl that has a front and a back piece, or that one just has the front?
This one has a front and a back.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So to tuck in under your coat in the winter, on those winter days. So if you're an outside cold person, sometimes a cowl isn't, keeping the wind off the neck part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also just a fun way to play around with different techniques that maybe you don't want to commit to a whole sweater. So I like doing it for that reason. And then it evolved a little bit into, more what we're talking about with over the shoulder. So like this was my Nourishment Cowl. And boy, it's doing funny things for focusing. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why it's doing that. But this one, it has like a little split hem, but this one really goes over your shoulders like a yoke sweater would.
a number of cowls, and you did, is that what you started with? I can't remember what you
started. My first 2 patterns were really, and of course I thought, oh, hats will be simple to start with, until I had a cable and I was trying to do decreases, and I went, oh yeah, right, this is not just as easy as you think it's going to be.
Right, because you had that whole set of color work hats, like a whole.
I did a hat called the Fells cap, and here's
that had, the picture had a bunch of different hats. Yeah. Okay.
And so I did it in a bunch of different color work palettes. And I tried to show, this is stranded color work. So I tried to show in this one, what was it like to have low contrast, high contrast? What was it like to put a speckle in, right? Because we kind of get told the rules, but some people have more challenges picking out colors than others. Some people want to break the rules, and what does it look like, and how do you know what you're going to get when you put different color combinations together?
Absolutely. So what are you wearing? Because that is stunning.
So, well, I wore this partly to I don't know, I guess satiate your color appetite would be the way to put it. This is called, now bear with me, this was not a marketing decision, this was an inspiration decision. It's called 700 Fence Posts Cowl, and it's from the lyrics of a song. Oh. So I originally designed it in a DK weight, and so this is the DK weight here, and it's a cowl that's done on the bias. So when you turn it certain ways, right, you see like the triangular shawl, and then you turn it other ways and you only see part. And this was designed in So Happy Jane yarn. She is an independent dyer out of Idaho. Okay, so I was in her club for a long time, and this was actually the organic merino. So she did superwash and organic, and I kind of switched back and forth. And then I really wanted to have a piece that you could do in fingering weight or in DK. So the one I'm wearing is fingering weight. And also just, I love the theme this year that so many people are looking for ways to use scraps. So this was actually like a mini set. This was a Pride set one year. But the whole idea is you can use scraps, you can use a color changing yarn, you can use, a countdown calendar. You can use so many different things and have all those colors go in and out. So there's a fingering weight and a DK weight. And most of my patterns have stories behind them, which some people could care less about. But that's why the name of this came up, because when you're knitting on the bias like this, and you first knit, your one triangular shawl, and then you join it, and then you knit the other triangular shawl, and it becomes a seamless cowl. I kept having this song Meet in the Middle go through my head. Oh, yes. And it's a country song, right? It's kind of an old country song at this point. They measure the distance between these 2 young kids growing up.
Okay.
And it starts with, it was 700 fence posts from your place to ours. And so
I remember this,
that one?
Yeah.
Yes. They meet in the middle neath the old Georgia pine.
Yes.
Right. So anyway, the dyer in Idaho is best friends with one of my first knitting friends from Boston. They grew up together. They went to college age together. And so I kept thinking about how they were across the country. And this was during the pandemic. And it was like thinking about how we were all so far apart, but we were also close together in our hearts. And so that's where like the construction of this in her yarn led me to the title and the song, and then this whole other meaning behind it. So, we always get asked as designers, like, what's your inspiration, or what's your process, or how does it work? And it's not the same every time, right? But for this one, it started with the yarn and then the construction that I wanted to play around with. And then it sort of went into the story, as opposed to it being the story first. So it goes both ways sometimes.
That sounds really fun to knit. I love the color palette that you have in the one that you're wearing, for sure. Yeah. But it looks so completely different in the maroon or burgundy color.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of a pattern like that, is that you could make it more than once, and it would really change up. The final outcome could be look completely different, and you wouldn't look like you had knit the same thing over and over again. Right. Yeah.
Right.
For
sure.
And
we all know that if you have a pattern you like, every time you knit it, you sort of have a little bit more insider information for what you want to do with it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because my testers always say, this would be so much easier to knit when it's all perfect.
Right.
Which is, yeah. So let's talk about the shawls that you have behind you.
Sure. So these are two of them that are specifically done in farm yarn, and two of the ones that I asked to, you never know designer to designer, but I said, really, if this is about lifting up farms and talking about farm yarn and small producers, I'd love to share the patterns as prizes in your knit along. So this one, I'm going to bring it closer because it wants to do that focus thing where it's focusing on me, but let's focus on the shawl. So here you can see the different textures. And this one, the color work is all, again, that slip stitch color work. There's a little bit of cabling here that's just 1x1 cabling. So you don't even need a cable needle. And it kind of repeats in a way that I just like the kinetic movement of it, I guess is how I talk about it. And it's called Shearing Day Shawl. And one of the reasons this design has just been the most special to me is because it's a shawl. So you can, like your farm shawl, your farm yarn shawl, you can knit it in all different yarns and different weights and different sizes. And you don't have to worry about exact age. But the whole point of this was that it was originally done as a collaboration with Knitting the Stash. And Melissa Littlefield, who has that podcast, focuses on farm yarns and curating farm yarns from all across the country. And so she did a call for designers to knit in the yarn she was going to have made. And so I answered it and described what I wanted to do. And the whole point of this shawl, much like your farm yarn shawl, was to have a life beyond just the original yarn it's published in, but so that all of these farms across the country, right? If we design in any one of their yarns and they run out of it, there's that mentality that, oh, I can't make it in the yarn anymore. The pattern's, old news. But the whole point is to lift everybody up from all of these farms and show that like it's a little bit of the rising tide lifts all ships because it's a different model.
Which is exactly why I knit the shawl in 3 different farm yarns, right?
Yes,
like
exactly.
I started out with Amy of Russ Farms yarn. And then I was like, wait a second. She's in Pennsylvania. I'm in Minnesota. People don't have access to her at a show necessarily.
Right.
And so then maybe I should do something with a couple of the local farmers. So then I reached out to Sam, who's north of me, and Teresa, who's south of me, and said, hey, and then they moved forward with the cowl. They wanted to do the knit along. And we really wanted to encourage people too, that might want to spin. And so that's why the cowl is so long, because, we're having it go way through September, and because you could knit the shawls in, a few weeks if you have time, but we wanted to give people time to spin the yarn and then knit it up as well. And honestly, I'm so excited about the prizes. We have gotten so many great prizes. So I hope people are really going to jump on board. Not necessarily because they're knitting my shawl, but to try farm yarn, right? Yes, it's great that they're doing it with my shawl in the local cooperative. So last week I interviewed Stacy. That podcast went up yesterday, of Dressel Family Farms. And she had it knit up in her yarns, which was Cormo, which I hadn't used. So I had used Icelandic and Shetland, right? So we're just getting into, and I got to feel and look at her yarn knit up in the farm yarn shawl. But it's really about, these people experiencing a farm yarn and going with, the farm yarn, the different palettes of the different people. And she dyes exclusively with organic matter, right? Food waste and flowers and weeds from her farm, right? And so I was like, okay, that's a completely different thing than what Teresa's doing, who's doing almost milling all just the natural fibers. And then Sam, who is raising the sheep, but is also completely a yarn dyer, that does superwash merino in her booth, but can also do, just her farm yarns because she's a brand new sheep farmer. So it's a whole world that the people who are aware of it are really into it, right? And they really get it. But the rest of the superwash merino knitting universe is not. They just, they don't know. They're not looking around. Because Teresa sells hers just at the local farmers market where people are walking by to just buy food and plants. And then she's got her wool pellets there and all those types of things. So I have a big learning curve, although I was fairly aware But I got the new Farm and Fiber Knits magazine is
Mhm.
so phenomenal and about learning and they're traveling and doing, information, and their
Yeah,
blog posts are incredible. I mean,
they're great.
their emails are giving so much information. So do you have a local farm?
Well,
And
not me personally, but in our state, yes. So
right,
actually, the
like
the
somebody
nourishment.
that you used for that particular shawl. And is
So
it three colors, two colors?
it's three colors, and
Okay.
it's three natural colors in this
Yep.
case, but
Yep.
some of the testers did it, in colors as well. And it was funny because, what we were saying, like initially drawn to all the colors, but this one, when I did it, got me really hooked on the naturals because they are just as beautiful. They are just beautiful in a different way, right?
Yep.
So
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
oops, I don't have it looking very nicely back there. There we go. So that particular one, the two farms are You and Us Farm out of Nebraska and Kathy Capel's Seven Sister Farm out of Illinois, which her flock has now been dispersed. But that's because it was specifically done with the Knitting the Stash as that collaboration.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what I've been trying to do, right? But we know knitting takes so much time. So I would love to have this knit in a local farm yarn as well. And maybe I will get one on the needles at some point. But this is one of the only patterns I've done where I've only knit this one because you kind of get on with other this is a local farm yarn. Would you like to see this one?
Absolutely.
Well?
Yes.
So this is
everything.
Yeah, this is Mending Fences. And this is three colors, very subtle. There's a dark purple, a light purple, and then the natural gray. And this is a local farm in Massachusetts called Ashford Heights Farm, and they're focused on long wool. And so she has Leicester long wool and Gotland. And this was done, I bought the skeins of yarn at a farm fiber day.
Okay.
And this is when I didn't have as much experience with the farm yarns either. So these I bought because of the color, because my friend called me over to the booth and I stepped out and they just glowed in the sunlight. And I was like, all right, we're going to get three. We're going to do something. I don't know what. But I wasn't really paying attention at that point to the breed and the characteristics of the breed. And so I got it home and I was doing a bunch of swatching and I really liked it in like a garter stitch or a reverse stockinette, but I wasn't designing anything with that at the moment and I sort of put it aside. And then it just so happened that this stitch pattern, I was actually swatching some of Tammy White's yarn from Wing and a Prayer Farm because I really wanted to use that yarn for my next design. And I was like, well, I love this stitch, but I don't love it with this yarn. Not because they're not both beautiful on their own. It wasn't the right match, right? Like you can have two great friends, but they don't make a great couple. And so it was like that. And I said, oh, but now I remember swatching the Ashford Heights long wool. And now I know why I want it in long wool. And I'll see if I can get it to focus. Because do you see these elongated stitches?
Yep.
So in Tammy's yarn, which was plump and squishy, they had a totally different look. But the way that they elongate in a long wool, it was to me, it was just like more elegant, which sounds kind of funny for a farm yarn, but I didn't want this to be like a squishy texture and like something that you wanted to keep your neck warm. This is going to keep your neck warm, but it's also going to look elegant because of the drape and the way that it folds. And so they've all really helped me in that way that you're talking about, like learning the education of it. You can sit there and read the books and read the descriptions of the breed, but until you're working with the yarn in your hands, you don't really know. And so anyway, I've learned from shepherds, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But when you go to these fiber festivals, if you ask questions, most of them are so enthusiastic and don't always get asked those questions that they are more than willing to share with you and help you find the right yarn for your project.
Yeah. So do you have a local festival, something that you go to each year?
Yeah. We are pretty spoiled here, as you are in Minnesota, right? You have a lot of local yarn shops. So we have those, and that's sort of everyone's entree. But there is crossover with the independent dyers and the farm yarns. And that's how I first got into this, because we have something called, it's the Wayland Winter Farmers Market. And that's a town over from me. And twice a year, they do a farm fiber day in the winter. And that's where I first went, thinking it was going to be this small little festival. And it's quite robust. And I don't know if they probably have, I will probably get it wrong, but I mean, feel like they have at least 60 vendors. And they have the people who are doing the independent dyeing, but then they also have the farm yarns that are really small that go to the farmer's market with their 10 skeins to start, right? And then all of a sudden they're going there. So meadow-fed lamb, which is out in Hadley, Massachusetts, this natural color here is theirs. And they first started selling it at farmers markets where they sell their chicken, where they sell their eggs. They do breed for meat and for wool with their lambs. It's Finn sheep. They have a silvopasture process with their orchard. So you can learn all this stuff about like climate and farming and all these things along with it. And they only had a few skeins the first year they were there. And the way that they spoke about them, it was like you were buying a child from them as they handed it over and told you all the characteristics of the lamb, the wool, what you wanted to do. And so it just feels so special. And I paired this one with the Junction Fiber Mill. And Junction Fiber Mill, right, they are a small mill. They're 5 years now. And they started in order to do that small batch processing for small farms. But then they also found kind of a niche where they could do this color changing yarn and do a non-superwash one. So, we know that there's a few on the market. Some are superwash, some are different breeds, some are BFL. Theirs is a combination with merino and other local breeds. And, they get the wool and they make that. So I kind of paired these two together, and it was a way to use a small farm yarn. And also this farm happens to have their yarn spun at Junction Fiber Mill. So it was a nice partnership, the way that kind of all these collaborations work together, and they're not just about one-to-one and you can't, go beyond that, because we have to make it so that people can find the yarns they want to use too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. We were talking about that with how many places now that Stacy's going to travel to. She's just on the road.
I watched it. It was mind blowing, right? As far as Tampa, Florida, I think she said.
Yeah, like how many? Like where can people? It's local yarn to me, but she's taking it everywhere just to like really try to. That's impressive that you watched it already. It just came out. But
the way these feeds work, right? When they suggest something and it's at the right moment, you get to watch it. So
yeah. So but yeah, she's just on the road taking her, her yarn everywhere so that people can find her. Right. And I was just really impressed with how much traveling she's doing alone, right?
I know. And that's what
she has friends. So like it's like place to place, but that is impressive and I do think that most knitters who don't have a local yarn store could find a local farm.
Yeah.
Right. Like they might be in the city. I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? I'm pretty far out, but within an hour of me, I probably have, 12 places that I could go and find. Like right down the road is a llama farm. Right down the road.
I was going to say alpaca. There's alpaca
right?
farms
and so
too,
and,
right?
and they do yarn and they sell it in the ice cream shop in the town next over. And I was like, why does this ice cream shop have a little shelf of yarn? Well, because they're local to the town, and you know, and so I do think if you keep your eyes open, you can kind of find local yarns, and you can just Google. I mean, to find.
It can be hard, right? Because they have so much to do. They don't necessarily have the ability to keep up a website or other things, so it's a little bit of a scavenger hunt. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they are around. You just have to find them.
And ours, the one Stacy's a part of the fiber shed down there, which I think but they have farm tour day where you can go and they each set up, they put some barbecues out on the tables and you can get a barbecue sandwich, and then you can go to the next place and get a piece of pie or whatever, and you can tour the farms, and then they just have a little table out with what they have there. So you can find those things and places to buy where you can actually touch and feel the yarn. Like I wanted so bad to just hand that Cormo through the screen to people so that they could feel how lovely her yarn was. It was just, it was really nice. You have your sweater on the mannequin back there, right?
Oh, I do.
Let's look at that.
So this is Petals and Lace. And it was designed, this is also the meadow-fed lamb fin for the main color. And this is one that was called Milky Gray that they did a couple of years ago. And it just glowed and was gorgeous. And this is paired with which you don't find a lot, the hand-dyed farm yarn for the contrast color. And what I might do for you, if I feel like you can see it a little bit better, this doesn't want to play well. I have a lot left in this skein. You might be able to see this. Can you see these colors better?
Oh, yeah.
And so I bought this skein. This is from Hands and Heart Farm out of Charlotte, Vermont. And I bought this skein for the color, right? This was I'm trying to think of which fiber festival I even got it at. Oh, I know. I got it from Norwich Knits when I was in Vermont. It's the whole idea that you get the souvenir skein, right? For where you're traveling.
Yes.
So I wanted a local one and they had it and it was beautiful. And the colors reminded me of hydrangea. And we have so much hydrangea. So this is the Hands and Heart Farm logo. We have so much hydrangea on Martha's Vineyard where my parents are. And last summer they were just stunning. So I had packed up when I went to visit them, all of this yarn, not knowing what I was going to use, what inspiration was going to strike. And when the hydrangea started blooming, I said, I want to do a color work yoke with that. And so
of the sweater kind of up close so people will see it clear.
Yeah. And so
those are meant to look like the hydrangeas,
hydrangea.
Right?
Exactly. And so the idea too was a little bit of the inspiration from the Bauhaus Stickning colorwork yokes in Sweden that they had, many years ago done, but where you use like knits and pearls as well.
You're purling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And if you look at the texture over the bloom of a hydrangea, it's not smooth, right? It's kind of that bumpy, messy, organic type look. And so that's why I designed it this way. And it's petals and lace because it is like, it's not meant to look like an exact replica, but it's meant to evoke the feeling of petals. And then there's some, lace in between the layers as well. Just very simple lace work, but something. And then with this whole idea of design it in farm yarn, but are people not going to want it if they can't get the exact yarn? I've been trying to then do a second version where I do it in yarn that you can get, but is still ethically produced, sourced. And so this is the Green Mountain Spinnery Cotton Comfort yarn. Okay. And this really made it so Green Mountain Spinnery, they're using all domestic wool, depending on which type of yarn you're getting. It might be New England, it might be from the West Coast or, another part of the country. They're using organic cotton from Texas. And everything is very clearly labeled. You know what you're getting. It's a cooperative that's up in Vermont. They're wonderful to work with, right? Just all those pieces. And it's, it depends on which base you're getting, but also very accessible from a price accessibility perspective. And so that was a way I could use the farm yarn. I could use another comparable yarn and then have two versions there.
Right. But kind of like me, almost every time I design something, I'm like, oh, this should have a short sleeve version, or this should have long sleeves, or this should have another color palette. And then you're stuck in that, okay, people might not like it in the oranges and yellows. They might prefer it to be in purples and blues. So I'll knit another one. And then
right. And that's the whole going down the rabbit hole of the conversation about test knitters, right? But if you have a good mutual relationship with your test knitters and people are doing it in different colors and they feel good about the process and you feel good about the process, it really is something that's for the whole community. It helps all of us by sharing those projects. But this pattern, I tread lightly into the, too many choices versus offering a lot of choices. So in the same pattern, it has instructions for short sleeve, 3/4 length, full sleeve. It has instructions for 2 different necklines. It has instructions to put short rows in the back of the neck or not, and to put short rows at the bottom or not. And, I was talking about my tech editor earlier. She is an amazing partner. And she was like, I don't know, we have to be careful of, too much creep, too many choices. But she was wonderful because she would tell me if it wasn't. She said, I really think you've done it in a way that's concise. People won't be distracted by too many things. And I did get that same feedback from testers. So that was really gratifying, right? Because we put so much into these patterns, especially a garment. I mean, a garment, when you are grading it for 10 plus sizes and you're putting in different options, you don't even know if you're going to make your money back on the investment of it.
For sure.
But, we do it because we love it and we want to share it with everyone. And so when you get that positive response, it's fantastic. And there's no better compliment than somebody saying that they're going to knit your pattern twice, and especially a garment. So like when that happens and people send you pictures, you're like, oh, it's all worth it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. There is, and the shelf life of a pattern is so short, right?
I know.
It's like it comes out, and if you don't grab people within the first couple of weeks, it's forgotten. I really want to do some podcasts on older patterns that should be revisited, right? Like not old,
I think that's happening. I think one of the trends I've seen, and I think it's smart from a business perspective and also just from a human preservation, is designers reknitting old patterns in new yarn.
Yeah.
And not just big name designers and not just tiny independent designers. I've seen both doing it. And, maybe it comes along with like a regrade so that there's more sizes. Or maybe it's just taking a pattern that there's no reason it can't be knit in one yarn for the winter and one yarn for the summer, even at the same gauge. And people are doing that. And it's smart. It's smart business. And it's also the type of thing that, like, we are this instant gratification society. And there's a lot of things about that are destructive, right? But why not use knitting patterns to say it doesn't have to be that way? How many of us have 30 or 100 or 130 patterns in our queue? And we don't, in most cases, we don't love them any less than when we first put them in our queue, but we've been distracted so many times.
For sure. Yeah.
So
for sure,
I'm going to champion that.
I often purchase that way, right? I purchase the yarn for the pattern and put it in a 2-gallon Ziploc bag so that it can stack in the closet. And I go back later and I'm like, this is lovely. And why are you knitting on the new thing that you just purchased because,
Right. Yeah. And they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can do both. Like sometimes you can cast on the new thing that you really just had to cast on, and then find that time, that day when you cast on the thing you wanted to 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And you'll know as you go. You don't even have to finish both of them, but at least give yourself the opportunity to see if you still want to.
Yeah, I think there's a real market for knitters who want to knit patterns for people who have things in their stash that they'll never get to.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like my husband is a car restorer, is his hobby. And he's really knowledgeable. He knows so much. And we have a little local car show. When we go up there are so many men walking around who have cars in their garage, an old beater from there whenever that they want to fix up, but no time and no energy, right. And so, there are always guys walking around going, I need a guy to fix up this old car for me so I can just drive it, or help me, or show me where to go, or whatever. And I think the same thing about knitters who have these projects that they really want knit, but they are knitting their fingers off over here. And they're like, that's never going to get knit because whatever. And I think if somebody wanted to go into like hand knitting business, not that there's any money in that, but if they just want to touch beautiful yarn and patterns and knit for hire, it's kind of like, I reason it to the sock machine situation, right? Like people are like, why would you get a sock machine if you love knitting socks? Well, because you have 50 skeins of sock yarn that you want to work through. That's never going to happen in your lifetime. And so the sock machine is the way to still touch the yarn, put in the heels and toes maybe, or the cuff, or, but just get some of that yarn knit up, which I'm not a machine person at all. Like I don't like a sewing machine. I have a hate relationship with the sewing machine, right? I'm just not a machine person, but I do think that we all have so much yarn. We have so much yarn. It's kind of,
I know. And there are people who don't have it, right? And so, yes, if you can marry those two together, and if somebody is looking for some kind of purpose and to be compensated and you're willing to compensate them fairly, then yes, raise your hand, because those of us are out there who would love to have some projects.
If you don't have it and you would love to knit a sweater in some beautiful yarn for someone, I don't know how that whole thing got started in my head, but I was like, I have some beautiful yarns that I would love to, I don't want to pay someone, but because I want to knit them, but there are people out there that would just like the sock machine thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Crank me a bunch of sock tubes and then I'll get them knit up.
So this is one of the samples of the Rosalind Vest.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah. So this is the vest. It's a bulky weight vest. So a lot of people shy away from it. But I'll tell you, when you wear a bulky weight vest and you've got your arms free, it's a fast knit. It's a fun knit. And it's really not too
hold
warm.
up the stitch pattern real close. There we go. Yeah.
So that's
I zoomed in on that.
Yeah. That is called the thorn stitch. And I used it first in a set that I did called Wind Chill Warning. I used it on a hat and on a dicky. And then I really liked it. And so, you know, with this one, what I wanted to do is design something where it had like this band around it. And I was thinking what to name it. I wanted to name it something that honored my grandmother, who I mentioned. And her summer cottage was called As You Like It, like the Shakespeare play, but spelled differently. And so, of course, Rosalind being the heroine of the play, I thought that plus the thorn stitch, there's this whole thing with thorns about being like a protective element. And so I thought, well, you've got this band around you. You know, it's Rosalind, it's nature, it's thorns. And so that's how this one got named.
Yeah.
That's the So Happy Jane yarn. And we'll give a little shout out because I know they're going away, but I can't help. They were so supportive of independent designers. This was the one that was done in the Brooklyn tweed. And yeah. So, and you know, the way that they sourced their wool. So if anybody's got the Arbor Lodge in their stash, that's what this one was knitted up in. And so those are my two garment designs. I do have more coming, but wanting to work with farm yarns and do as many where you can feature as many different farms as possible. I can't do all garments. So I've been kind of cranking out the accessories. You had asked me some of my favorite yarns.
Yes.
And I am always challenged to say that because I don't want to leave anybody out. Like everyone deserves to be given a shout out for having beautiful yarn. But I will say, I was asked that question last year at a local yarn store, and I really said it depends on the project. Tell me a project you're looking for, and I'll give you a few favorite yarns that would fit it. But I don't want to just give you a yarn just for the sake of a yarn. But now I've thought about it, and I'm going to do it anyway because it's a small farm. So this is the Turnbridge Cowl. I designed this last year for Vermont Sheep and Wool. And last year they were celebrating alpaca, camels, llamas. And so a woman named Terry Miller, who has Snowshoe Farm alpaca, said, would you design something in my yarn for it? And I said, send me these colors that are just so fall-like for Vermont. And then this one's got kind of a neat crown too, which gave me a little bit of trouble, but it's kind of a fun swirly crown. I'm shouting out her yarn because it just is really unique. It's 50% alpaca, 50% fine wool. It's spun at a place called Sally's Fen, and they don't take new clients. So I don't know that I should mention them, but the reason I am is because I've become a little particular about the spin of my farm yarns, which if you told me when I was learning to knit because I wanted to do acrylic stockings like my grandmother made us, that I'd be telling you that I care about the spin of the farm yarn I'm using, I would think you were crazy. But now, like, I feel it, and everybody's got their own thing, right? Some of them really like a thick and thin or more of an artistic yarn, but there's something to me about a really consistently spun, delicious yarn that is just, it's exceptional. So Terry's yarn is like that. So if anybody sees her, this is one that's like a heavy worsted to even like a light Aran weight. And I'm making some fingerless mitts in it right now because I still have some left over. You touch that yarn and I'm sorry, but if it's in your wheelhouse, that yarn is just one that is not to be missed. So if you like a squishy yarn, I would say seek that one out.
Yeah, 50-50. Yeah. Is she dyeing that yarn too?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yep. She does a beautiful job. And then I can show you something that isn't out yet if you'd like a little preview.
We'd love one.
Okay, so this is going to be for Vermont Sheep and Wool 2025. And this is the original version. So, you know, this is different. This is Ellen's Half Pint Farm, and Ellen manages a lot of the vendors. You know Ellen, okay.
Yeah.
So she had worked with us last year on Designer Alley for the first time. And this year we're going to honor designers as part of the theme of the festival. And so also she asked, would I design something in her yarn? And it took me a while because, you know, this is a very different yarn than I've been using. A lot of drape, This one is 50% yak and 50% silk. And she has one that's 50% camel and 50% silk. And I think this might be one of each in this one. So I designed this to be a really drapey cowl. And then to show people, like you said, a different color. And this one also is a different fiber content because it's wool. Here's a version in green and blue.
Oh.
So it's to be named. It doesn't have a name yet, but there are, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4 different stitch patterns plus the ribbing at the top. And it's just a nice oversized drapey cowl.
Yeah.
So
that's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, you've done a lot of different fiber blends.
Yes.
A lot.
Yep. It's part of the challenge, but then your hands, when I picked that up, I mean, it took my hands a while and it took my head a while. I had this vision of what I wanted to do and how I wanted it to drape and how I thought different patterns might work together. But it was, it was a totally different thing. I guess this is not a good comparison, but it's like you don't do brain surgery and then go do knee surgery, right? It's like there's different things even within a craft.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this has been lovely. I'm just tickled that we met through this spontaneous chat where you were like, hey, would you like 3 of my farm yarn patterns? And I was like, yes, because at the time we didn't have a lot of prizes yet. And the cow wasn't really moving. And I really do want to get the word out for people to know that, like, I got so much yarn from Brown Sheep to give away. Like, I just am like, I want people to get these prizes because they're amazing. Like we're gonna have, each of the farms that I'm interviewing is giving a prize and we're getting gift certificate. I mean, it's just been lovely. And then to just have a couple people, participate. I'll have more prizes than I'll have people unless we get, the word out a little bigger. And, the Instagram algorithm is just kind of cruddy and, where people aren't seeing things anymore. And that's really how you got your stuff to be seen by people for a while, is just you were posting on Instagram or Facebook and just, and now it's.
One of the other things with the farm yarn shawl, right, is it's a fairly, I don't want to say nothing's a quick knit, right? But it's meant to be a quicker knit.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And it has 2 stitch patterns, right? Like it's beyond advanced beginner friendly. That I write a lot of patterns that are advanced beginner friendly because I teach so many beginners. And so they want to knit a shawl, their first shawl, but and I have some patterns that have all kinds of techniques in them. But I'm finding that with my checklist pattern where I write out every row that you have to do. So you don't have to have a Post-it note or an extra sheet of paper when you have to do a repeat 20 times, that I'm finding that niche of people who want that, right? They kind of want that. And so they'll knit my patterns more often because of that. And so that's where I'm kind of, but yeah, it's really, the repeats are over and over again. And it can be done in any weight of yarn, like you said, in any fiber. It could, it could absolutely be done in acrylic from a big box store if it needed to. But I was really wanting to encourage people to, and it could be done in all one color. Like if people had purchased a couple, it's DK weight. Are most of your the shawls that you gifted fingering, or not that it matters? Because
no, they're DK.
DK,
So the Shearing Day is DK, and I would say it's a lighter DK even.
Yeah. Okay.
And then this one here is worsted, and the UnBroken Circle cowl, which we didn't even talk about.
That's the one that you just had the podcast come up on.
Yeah, it was a conversation with Paula Ahrens, because this one, I would point people to hear her story on Junction Fiber Mills Millcast. And if you go to the record for this pattern, it will point you there, because the story, I could retell it and just not do it justice. If you are into farm yarn, or you think you have an inkling you might be into farm yarn, listen to Paula tell the story of her Ellie Mae, which is what inspired this towel. And, I have podcasts about it. It's there, but I don't know if you can see, this wasn't originally designed to look like sheep looking back at you, but doesn't it?
Oh, totally. That's exactly what I thought it was.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it did ultimately become that, but there's a ton of symbolism in this cowl, between it being a Mobius circle, between it having these sheep that make these circles around it. and just so many like analogies to the things that Paula had experienced with this U and things that sheep do to make these circles that they don't break. The person in the middle of the circle has to break. It's an incredible story, and that's what motivated this. So I think this was the third one that I said, these two. So this would also be the DK, but I knit Paula's in a worsted weight as well. I just did fewer repeats. So you can do them in different weights.
Right. Because I did 2 in DK and 1 in fingering. And it was more of a thick and thin, so the fingering could get a little thicker. That was Teresa's, and that one's the one that had all the color in it, the cream with the yellow and the red that I had already garnered from her. And at an event, because you don't always see those bright colors in the farmyard, not always. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to get a farmyard, I'm going to buy this from her. But then we paired it with the cream, and it ended up being a little bigger because I had more skeins for the color, because they were minis. They were like 50-gram minis. So, but people could use any of that. So, well, thank you so much, Erika.
Thank you, Corey. Awesome. It was lovely.
Everybody go over and watch the Knit Kind podcast. Go over and take a look at all of Erika's designs. She is going to be a part of this farm yarn giveaway at the end. And so the farm yarn shawl cowl goes through September 20th. So you've got plenty of time to knit it up in whatever you have local to you. If you've got a farm yarn, or you want to order it from one of the people that I'm actually interviewing throughout the entire summer. So I'm really thankful that you were so generous to offer that up, and that we got to meet. This is great.
Oh, I know. Well, you're welcome, but thank you also.
Talk to another designer and chat about farm yarn. So okay, we will say goodbye right now, and I will talk to everyone in 2 weeks.